In this video, we are going to see how to properly cut out photos. And depending on the situation, I will show you a few techniques. But before doing that, let's talk a little bit more about smart objects. So for example, let's take a look at these two layers. At the first glance, they look the same, but they are not. They have the same type of content. You see the same photo, but these photos are different. The original photo is different because this is the raw photo that comes directly from our camera, and you can tell because I can open Bridge and you can see here the photo, and you can see his 16-bit depth, and it's a CR2 type of file. And when you drag and drop this image into Photoshop, what happens? The Camera Raw plugin will basically open it. You see, you can modify it, you can change the depth, and when you are happy with the result, you press OK. And once it is now inside Photoshop, this is a smart object. If you press enter, you will see it's a smart object. But the problem is now, if you double click on this photo, the only thing you can do is basically modify the photo with the Camera Raw filter, with the Camera Raw plugin. So you cannot go inside the photo and paint on it, or create a mask on it and stuff like that. Meanwhile, if you create the layer, the smart object, dragging in a TIFF file, which is 16-bit anyway, the smart object is created automatically, as you can see here. If you press enter, you say, okay, this is what I like to do. And then if you double click in here, you will open the photo as it is, and then you can modify it. I don't know, you can add a mask, for example, something like this. If you close and save, it will update. And this is basically different because we can actually modify the content of this layer. Meanwhile, with the previous version here, with the previous layer, we can just modify the color grading, exposure, and stuff like that. So the way you import, the way you embed smart object basically change then the way you can work on it. And for example, let's say that you import an AI file, which is an Adobe Illustrator file. If you double click then on the smart object of that file, Adobe Illustrator will open up, and then you can modify the file in Adobe Illustrator, and then you save, close, and then the file, the layer will be updated. But of course, you need Adobe Illustrator to work on that layer because the original software, the file comes from Adobe Illustrator, not from something else. So what to do if you have a Camera Raw, if you have a raw photo and you want to transform that photo in a TIFF file because you want to be able to modify the content of that smart object, you can just open the file from here, and drag it into Photoshop. But instead of dragging it into the file, into the PSD file, you drag it on the top. And so it will open in a new file, okay? And then you wait, okay? This is it. You press open. And now this is a brand new file, and it's 16-bit. And then you save this as a TIFF file. And this will basically gives you the ability to open it and modify and paint over it or create a mask or whatsoever. Okay, so this is the right way. Okay, from here you can actually, if you don't want to save it, you can actually right click on the layer, create a smart object from here. Wait for it to become a smart object, and then once it's a smart object, you can drag and drop it into the old file, into the Photoshop file, and then that's it. You have content, which is a smart object, but if you double click, you see it opens up like this. Okay, so it's one step more if you have a raw format photo, but at least with this, in this way, you can modify the content. So let's take the background, the trees, to understand a few techniques about cutting out photos. And what we want to do is basically to delete the background, the white background here on the sky. And I will now hide the foreground and also the render. And the first technique I show you, double clicking on the layer and going down with the blend if. I mean, this works fine, but there's a con. The con is that if you then apply an adjustment on this layer, the effect that you see now may change. Okay, so these blend if, it's really working only if you are not going to modify, for example, the brightness of this layer. Okay, one other thing that may not work properly is the fringe definition. I would say sometimes if you zoom in, you will see that it's probably very pixelated and is not kind of smooth. I mean, in this situation, it works well because the sky is very bright, okay? But sometimes, you're not that lucky, I would say, okay? And what we want to do is we want to find a way that works 90% of the cases, okay? So, but anyway, just, for test and for a quick preview, this works well. Now, second type of cutout. We can now work inside the smart object. This is something I do. So I'm not trying to cut out the 16-bit file in this image, but I will cut out the 16-bit file inside the original image. And the reason is, in that way, if I want to have another mask here, I can have it. And also, if you do the work inside the smart object, you can also select the original layer and make a copy of it. So you can press Ctrl J to make a copy. And I don't know, maybe you made a mistake, maybe you want to go back to the original one, you always have here a backup, and that's very, very cool. Okay, so let's talk about the first type of cutting out tool. The first type is, no matter what, the magic wand. Now, magic wand, basically, if you click on a pixel, the magic wand is going to try to select all the pixels close to that one within a range of values. And the range you can see is here is the tolerance. So if you have a tolerance of 0 and you have this checkbox on to contiguous, basically Photoshop is going to try to select all the pixel close to the one you clicked on, but they have to be exactly of the same value, the same color, okay? So if I click in here, you see there's basically almost no selection because this pixel is basically different from, the next one. But if I go up with the tolerance about, 50%, and I click again, as you can see now, I have all these pixels selected because all these pixels are inside tolerance of 50%, okay? And of course, you can go higher, you can go lower. If I put 10%, I click, you see, I select only these pixels. And, there's a first problem. And the first problem is if you look into the image, if you zoom in with Ctrl+, you will see that the selection basically stops and it doesn't go inside these areas. And that's because we have contiguous on. If I uncheck this and I unselect everything with Ctrl D, I can try again. If I click again, you see now I'm selecting also areas within the tree, within the branches. And that's very useful if you want to select, of course, also areas with the same value, which are not basically touching the original one. But anyway, what's the problem of the magic wand? The problem of the magic wand is the tolerance itself. So let's say that we have, we have here, we can zoom in, okay? And we can see that now in this area, okay, the difference between the green and the white, so the colors we have in between green and white, the amount of pixels we have, which are not totally green and not totally white, are kind of, I don't know, 2 pixels. Okay. But if I go and search for other areas, maybe I can find areas with more than 2 pixels, like this one. In this one, we have, for example, I don't know, 6 pixels. And the tolerance is always the same. So if I have a tolerance that basically makes the perfect selection for like 2 pixels, maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 is right. Okay, maybe more. I'll put it 25, for example. Let's try again. You see, 25 pretty good. Let's say 30. Okay. So if 30 is a nice number, is a great number to make a great selection here, where I have 2 pixels on the fringe, but you see, it's not great for areas where I have 6 pixels within the fringe. So the magic wand is not the best solution, you see, to select basically the background when you have a fringe which change in numbers of pixels. The magic wand, to say this in another way, is useful only if the border of your selection is always made of the same number of pixels, okay? Otherwise, forget about the magic wand. It's not going to work well, okay? Now, second type of selection to make a mask. You can go with select color range. And the color range is a little bit better because you can have here a visual result of what you are basically trying to select. And you can do this. You can have a first selection here. You can select the sky, for example. And you can see that I'm selecting here all the entire sky. And then here we have the fuzziness. And the fuzziness is the same of the tolerance in the magic wand. So we have the same problem, but differently from the magic wand, we can have a preview here. And if you want to select more areas, you can have the picker here to add some samples. And we can add, for example, here you see on the top right, we can add this value as another value to select. But anyway, as you can see, this is not easy to, understand. Even if you see, have a preview, you can choose here to have a preview. Sometimes it's difficult to understand if we are doing a good job or not. Because anyway, to understand if we have made a good job, you need to press OK. Then you have the selection, and then you make the mask with this button here. Of course, we need to invert the mask. So we select the mask, we press Ctrl-I, and then, I don't know, you can even, close this, save, and see what happens. Or just because you don't want to lose time, you can have here a black layer at the base and see if the selection is neat. Now, this is not bad. This is not bad at all. We can see here that we have some problems there. We have like a gray fringe, but it's something we can probably fix in a second moment. Anyway, if you do a proper job with the color range, you have high chances to, succeed, I would say. Another way to do it, which is my favorite way, now I will duplicate this layer again to show you, is basically to use the image itself to mask the image, okay? And we don't have to, we don't have to choose a tolerance or a fuzziness, but the image itself will basically decide the size of the fringe on the border, okay? And to do so, we need to go into the channels. And now every image is different, but you will see that basically every channel will be slightly different depending on the content. For example, this is the red channel, this is the green channel, this is the blue channel. Now, my advice is look at the channels and pick the one which is more contrasted on the area you want to select. And for example, in this moment, we want to select the trees. And so I can easily see that the blue one is the most contrasted one. So when you find the most contrasted channel, what you need to do, okay, is to select the entire channel. So we can Control A to select everything, Control C to copy the channel. You see I have the selection only on the blue channel. You need to go back on the layers, and then you add a new layer and you press Control V to paste the single channel. And now what we need to do is we can just add a curve on this, and we can just contrast this layer, okay? So you see, I contrast this a little bit. I mean, you don't have to, do something too strong, mainly on the borders, on the fringe of the selection. I mean, I don't care about this area. I don't really care about this area. We can select this area with a rectangular selection, okay, like this, and we can fill this area with a black value, okay, because we don't care about this. We care only about, the fringe of the trees. And so now we zoom in a little bit. See, now the most important thing is to not exaggerate with this curve, because what you don't want to do is to get, you see, such a strong and contrasted difference between white pixels and black pixels. You want to keep some differences. You see, you want to keep some gradients in between the dark areas and the white areas. Exactly what we were looking for, okay? So once you feel like that you get a nice contrast but not too strong, okay, then it's time to basically make a one channel only image. Now, if you don't want to merge these two layers because you want to keep them, maybe you make a mistake, maybe you want to go back to this and try again, you can also go back in the channels and just control click on one of the channels, because now you see this is what we see in this moment. So we can just select, and then we go back here, we hide this two layers, we select the original photo and we add the mask. And of course we need to invert this. So we select the mask, we press Ctrl I. And this should be a lot better than the previous color range technique, okay? Because we are using informations from the image to mask itself, okay? Now, once you are done, okay, you can close and save, and then the original file will update, and hopefully we can see the result and it looks okay. Another thing you can do once your work is done, okay, you can make a duplicate of this smart object. You keep this one off, hide it, just because you want to keep it as a backup. And then you right click on this one and you rasterize. And you need to rasterize because you need to run here layer option, which is in layer tab, matting the fringe. Basically, this option here will delete the last pixel around an area. And probably it happened to you. Sometimes you can see a white fringe, a white border or a black border around your cut out photos. Well, if you want to delete that automatically, of course, you don't have to, you cannot do it on a smart object. It should be a rasterized layer, and it doesn't work if you have a mask. So if you have a mask, you need to basically apply the layer mask, and so the layer mask disappear, okay? So once you have layer like this, you can go here, layer, matting, the fringe, 1 pixel is enough, you press OK, and as you can see, it gets a lot better, okay? And this basically works on the last pixel, and it fixes the alpha, okay? It takes away any kind of color you can have there, and as you can see, it's 10 times better, okay? So once you have this, you are done, and you can go on with other, areas, all right? If this doesn't work, if these techniques, are not enough, you can always, remember, you can always add a mask and then with a brush paint black where what you don't need. Okay, so and my advice is to go for a brush with a very hard edge, okay, very small, and maybe you can use the pen, and you can use this option here, which is basically the size on pressure. So if you press less, you will make a smaller tip, a smaller stroke. You can be a lot more precise. As a first step, I would try these three techniques. Okay, magic wand, if you have the same fringe thickness everywhere, color range, and for last, channel trick. However, in the next video, we're going to see how to create some custom brushes in order to mask your layers properly with different shapes.